Thanks for joining in to another episode of Plasma Faith Physics. Thanks for joining in to another episode of Plasma Faith Physics. And this morning's discussion is going to be about time, dimensions, and space. And a discussion a bit about, we're going to talk a little bit about NASA and their theories about time convergence and how time was created, or what they believe energies are purported. Though the book has been published in December 2013, I'm on my third volume, just finishing my second volume, starting on my third volume. I'm purporting and postulating the first volume as an introductory piece so that people who are unfamiliar with new languages that are non-existing in curriculums throughout the universities of the earth should become more aware and more informed that curriculums and informations are being hindered, or informations are not being added to curriculums, so that peoples in general populations won't become awares or won't evolve, and that the human condition remains at a stagnant rate of growth. There's a lot of great people who have spoke about this. I won't get into that. This is not a psychological discussion or a psychosocial discussion. This is a discussion about time and physics and the importance of understanding where the language of time actually began. If you excuse me, I'm going to have me a cup of tea. I'm going to prepare my tea as of now and wait for at least 2 or 3 more viewers before I begin. I don't know if you have a good view here of the 7 dimensions of space. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the perpendicular layers of space, and over here are the dimensions that exist in time. And we always ask, well, where did all of these states and laws and precepts begin? We'll begin discussion here. Here's a diagram in the book. One second. I'm going to show evidence and proof that upon publication of this book, which was in the year of 2013, the month was December, NASA also published their findings on their definition on the laws of plasma and the behavior of plasma convergence. Now, NASA has discovered this theory, or has created the theory of reconnection. It's called the reconnection theory, where plasmatic energies receive their information from states of existence called dimensions that they don't know of. But here in the book, a reminder, this is after 3 years of discussing with NASA scientists about my perspectives on the languages that should be created that define best the very creation of atoms, of time, and of matter. If you could see here, that is the creation of a particle, whether it be a particle that would define time, a particle that would define matter, or creation. Would all depend upon the languages that exist within these 4 dimensions. Now, this particular, I would say, unification of these dimensions, it's called a convergence. And when they converge, okay, the electromagnetic spheres, not the electric, but the plasmatic language that exists within these particular satellites were already pre-created or predestined by different forces that are unbeknown to man, present date. Now, this TPO, this particular point, is where all the forces are aligned and collaborate. And at this point here, at the convergence, if you see that they're forming concave shapes, here they're forming concave shapes, are immense, incredibly immense forces. Now, mind you, at this point here, we have what they call today in NASA, a super freeze or a super cold dimension. Now, they have found, of course, again, after deliberation and discussions with NASA, they are in concurrence with my discussions that they have found a great deal of ammonia gas in space. And if you know anything about ammonia gas, it runs and operates the compression. It functions in your compressors in your fridge to promote ice. And ammonia gas has a great deal of resistance to pressure, but it freezes and it creates a compliable or a conducive environment for plasmatic interactions. Now, a lot of the plasmatic or magnetic trains that are running in Japan today are run efficiently because of that very, very fact. They use today this thing called net zero, or they use nitro, or they use types of gases to freeze the superconductors to create this magnetic amplification of power. So it induces a great deal of current so that the magnetic train or the electromagnetic train can run across these tracks, say at speeds of 200 to 300 miles per hour. Now here within this super cold frozen TPO, we have a convergence of satellites, outer dimensions. I'll get into explaining that in another video, another broadcast. As they converge at this point of no return, right? There's no language within this atom here, or this particle. There are no protons at the point, and there are no neutrons at the point. There are no quarks, leptons. There are no, dimensional, descriptions or dimensional transcriptions or information as of yet. The dimensional transcriptions or dimensions begin to create laws and mandates as the atom begins to form, or the particle begins to form. Now, the first thing in the atom, as we're taught in high school and college universities, we have a proton and a neutron. But before the proton is ever even the inner subatomical parts of the subnature of the proton is ever defined, the neutrons are filled with information. Let's just say we have a neutrino or neutron of 10. That neutron, data will later be, transferred over to the proton, and then the proton will, become inducted through plasmatic induction, which is one theory, and have a value of 10. So the P will have a value of 10, and the neutron will become a buoyant. Neutron will become a buoyant factor, and as the proton increases in its value, it presses against these walls here. See where the forces, the vector, these are called vector velocity, magnitudinal forces. They press against these walls, and these walls, instead of becoming concave, they begin to form an outer orbit. The first outer shell of the atom or the particle. The second. Now if we have a proton of 10, then we have 10 outer shells or states of dimensions. And if you think of steps that are going down, that are descending or ascending, each step contains now what? Anything that's relative to a proton is a is an electron. That's correct. So now this, what you call transference or transcendence of information to the electrons, is not correctly, or unifiably explained in definitive proportions in the philosophical and psychological definitive languages, because it doesn't exist. But in my second volume, you'll read that there's a language or a form of communication between the protons as it forms in full volume and the outer states, even before the electrons are given a dimensional dispositional purpose. Sorry. I'm getting messages from abroad. Sorry. I apologize about that. And again, I'll slide this over here. Here's an actual diagram explaining the interaction of languages between the cyclical dimensions of the states. These are the dimensions. Remember, dimensions exist in their dimensions. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 dimensions, and each dimension has a specific mandate or law or precept. In certain physics language, the dimensions are called RFs, or radio frequencies, to an extent. But in the beginning, in the initial divergence of these dimensions, the RFs do not exist. They're not translated, or they're not primordial. Right now, the states here, the 4 dimensions, are just becoming to converge upon a dispositional agreement in time and space. Remember, here at this point, time doesn't exist whatsoever. Time only exists when there's an agreement upon how a particular body, or a particular space, or plasmatic existence, or even a dimension begins to form in a repetitive, cyclical obedience of the mandates, laws, and precepts and ordinances that they have inducted upon themselves. Now, here upon this convergence, we have the particle is born. Particle is created. Now, this particular particle gives birth to electrons. These are the electrons. And these electrons begin to what? Vibrate and resonate in response to the what? The RF, or the proton information that's in here. And this collaboration and convergences of languages are not discussed in physics, in philosophies of physics, or in languages of metaphysics. But here in the book, I extrapolate and create new languages to provide in-depth perspectives, so that these perspectives can create new dispositions, so that people can have a better understanding, and so that there can be a stronger platform or greater foundation where people can what? Converge and then transcend, to traverse and create greater new ideas, and to extrapolate upon those ideas, to create new formulas, so that these particular science fiction ideas like time traveling or teleportation or regenerative modeling, we're doing it with the 3D printer, but the 3D printer is the language of the 3D printer is also electromagnetic, but in the language of code of bits and bytes and software are all electromagnetic and plasmatic. But the thing is that we in our culture only understand them as binary bits or binary codes, bits and bytes, 00001. But if you break apart 0001 from its codes, you'll find the very derivative, the very origins of these particular particles are from magnetic influences, from magnetic forces that have been saved to a specific code of memory. And in that particular marginal code of memory, I would say that particular form, the computer deciphers it as code 0001, 000001. And that becomes a language for deciphering for other computers and softwares and what have you. It's very basic for me, but remember, this doesn't exist much elsewhere. Get the book Plasma Phase Physics. I recommend Volume 1 very strongly before you go into Volume 2 and Volume 3, because Volume 3 is more of a predictive precursor. Volume 1 was a book that I've written 20 years ago in manuscript form, and I did not submit it to publish until 2013 because time wasn't right. Society and the sophistication, the culture of society wasn't ready for this type of engagement. It's only now that we are discussing about plasmatic, dimensions, and it's only now that we're just understanding the importance of magnetic levitation and ion engines and things of that nature. But we can get into speaking about ion natures and ion engines and time travel and teleportation and Tesla's laws and Faraday. We can't get into even discussing that if we don't know how to explain the very origins from which they were born, or from the very origins that cultivate them. You can't isolate a culture that exists. Let's just say, for example, Faraday's findings were based upon someone else's discovery. Each scientist, if you do research, is based upon a scientist before them. So they only extrapolated and compounded issues and advanced it to the best of their abilities. And they created languages, yes, but they only extrapolated and transcended from models that were already given. They didn't really create anything. Now here is an actual creation of something from nothing. And if you can really get involved into understanding, go on YouTube. I recommend YouTube strongly. Get into magnetic levitation. Even if you don't know much about plasmatic dimensions or what have you, you will learn. It'll come to you. Inductive reasoning. It's a natural form of a natural form of thinking in the human mind. And the human being has the capacity of learning things at an incredibly tremendous rate. Even if you don't have the education, you'll find out exactly what I mean when you start watching these YouTube shows. Watch my YouTube shows on Google Plus, or go on YouTube and go up and follow me on Plasma Faith Physics. I talk a lot about politics because politics is being manipulated and controlled by crooked scientists. Crooked scientists meaning that they're not bad or evil in the sense so much as that they're greedy. They're looking for grants and funds in the billions and billions of dollars so they can create products for corporations. And they have done nothing to salvage, the Katrina disaster. They have done nothing to salvage the Deepwater Horizon disasters. And I've been very, very active with that also. I've sent them emails and had great discussions with them and deep with emails and telephone conversations, and way back since August of 2010. And I'll get into that on another scope, and I'll probably title that the Deepwater Horizon discussion. And here I want to get into, hold on, give me a second. Here I don't know if you could see this, the 7 dimensions. Now here, we all know that when you pass a rod through a coil, you get a current. That's very basic. Okay. And Tesla wanted to explain, Tesla and Faraday were trying to explain to the best of their abilities, well, where exactly does these particular laws and precepts come from? They didn't know. They found out through experimentation that there's a plasmatic entity that exists. And yes, the result of plasma energy or electromagnetic energy is the movement of forces that either conflict, attract or repulse each other. But here I'm very much explaining the very creation of the dimension that creates the law of electroplasmatic energies or electromagnetic energies for magnets, for the creation of dimensions, for the creation of states of space, for the creation of the environment the creation of the environment that deciphers codes that are yet passed through at the states of space. Here we go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 dimensions that exist, 7 layers of code. In each layer, here time does not exist yet here. Remember, time is just a byproduct of all these languages. Time is just an ordinance where matter and atoms start to begin inducting, start to obey, to behave and function in certain ways, and become obedient to what I call in this book the codes of eternity. And the codes of eternity doesn't necessarily mean have to be heaven. It could be just a language that was, I would say, ordained and mandated from these particular infinite dimensions of heaven. Now, remember, in the book, I also speak of one of the languages here, 7 languages here of space, and one of the languages of time, one of the languages of God is time. When God speaks, all of the universe, all of matter, and all of things obey and respect his wishes. That's socially speaking, okay, and culturally speaking. And that it is known that all things in the universe, finite, small, and infinite, obey him. The question is exactly how is that possible? If an infinite omniscient being speaks in the language of time, where exactly in all of matter, before the creation of all things, where exactly is God speaking to, and how is it that all things are receiving him at the same time? This is what I call the codes of eternity and the transference of the Falcon torrents. Here are the 7 layers, here are the 7 dimensions of states of space. Now each state of space, remember, each state of space already is encoded with ingredients. They already have been influenced by the other dimension, by other codes of eternity. And they're entering dimensions. Here you see dimensions that are in harmony with each other and agreeance with each other. And as they cross, this looks familiar, doesn't it? As they cross, as the 7 states of space fold upon each other and converge, as they cross, they're folding and overlapping, folding and overlapping again. And there's a great, immense amount of power that's occurring here. Great explosions, great dynamic energies are being released. All kind of chaotic confusion. And in physics, they go as far as calling it, there's evil born here, there's goodness born. All the languages for all kinds of things throughout the universe are being created here, even before the particle, or the matter is even being created, or even the law is being created. So now we have this dimension and that dimension, and all these languages that are conversing, or as in genetics, are crossing over, and creating the laws of helix. See, for genetic information, the laws of matter, fixed matters, shaped like cuboidal shapes like rocks and stones and things like that don't change shape. And then you have laws of fluidity and liquids, like the inner organs of the human body or of the oceans. We have all of these laws here that will go into this particular, what I call a portal in time, and then eventually a single particle will be born. It could be a particle for genetic code sequencing. It could be anything. A single particle is born, and that particle has a purpose. And once it starts to obey in obedience all of these transactions, once the particle starts to become repetitive and cyclical, and the electrons start to pulsate, and everything around it starts to form and follow a specific ordinance without tangenting, or how to say, migrating away or being chaotic, and staying within the origins, within this particular catechism, or within this particular regime, or with this reality. Time is born. Why time? Because it's cyclical and repetitive. And time here in the 4th dimension doesn't begin until this particular dimension is given to it as a gift. It's not the first thing that is given. It's almost the very last thing that's given. The matter is formed, and then the ordinances in the Lord is given to matter. And then when matter and the ordinances begin to create a harmonious existence, and matter, in whatever shape it may be formed, electromagnetic, it begins to be repetitive, whether it be in a helixical shape to form the helix in genetic natures, because there's helixical plasmatic languages, and that has been discovered just recently, but I knew about it 20 years ago, but it has been confirmed. And now we have these helixical matter that's formed. And within this helixical matter, we have a rate. And this specific rate is continuous and repetitive. And I call that in one of my chapters in this book, in volume 1, the cyclical pseudo-realities of time and space. Cyclical because it's repetitive and obedient. Pseudo because it's evading. It wants to become chaotic, and it wants to evade into a dimension. It wants to go back into its natural form. It wants to be free. and a reality because it must exist, and in the state of obedience, in the reality of how we see it with our senses, how we perceive it with our senses. The human being only has five, and then the sixth sense and intuitive senses that we are aware of. But there was a time that the human being had the ability to perceive things in dimensions. And just recently, not too long ago, there were 4 professors or 4 scientists who have discovered the GPS neuron cell. It's a neuron cell in the parietal lobe that was responsible for, involuntarily or unconsciously giving the brain and the human being the awareness of its location at all times on Earth. Now, the human being always has to have a sense of balance and a sense of safety and a sense of assurance that it is aware of where it is at all times, unconsciously. But we create the devices of compasses and navigational charts and what have you, because we have this disconnect within our own selves. We haven't strengthened the language to collaborate. It's a lot of articulation that we have to do. We are destroying the origins of our bases that define the human condition, the human culture, and we're not aware of that. By accepting a lot of things that are out there who want to destroy and deface the very values of languages. There's an angst out there, and I think that you're aware of if you watch the news. There's plenty of information out there, and you see the degradation and defamations of societies and demoralization of moralities and codes of conduct. These are all derivatives. And if you read the title of the book says it is a war. It's a psychosocial economic war in a race for the control of the machine against creation, time, and matter. You find a lot of angst, a lot of war and derivatives in creation, time, and matter. You just go to Planned Parenthood, you'll find there's angst for for abortion. You go to the LGBT community, you'll find a lot of angst for the rights to use for using the bathrooms. And you go to time, the war against time. You see, there's people who want to control the definition of time, because the origin of creation begins in the very concept and the imagination of human minds. And the 4 scientists who have discovered and received the Nobel Peace Prize have stated that, now that we have the concept and the origin of time, we want to own the very place where thinking or imagination begins in all humanity, in all of creation, in all of human beings. And there was a great argument about that, and they lost the argument to own that. They patent the finding, but they couldn't. They received the Nobel Peace Prize. They couldn't patent the actual ownership of the origin of thought. And that would have been for me a great evil, one of the greater evils, because you can't own human will, human freedom, and that's what they were after. The control of matter. If you redefine the origins of matter and the laws that have defined create matter, then all of social imaginative people, all social imaginative people like artists, musicians, great thinkers, entrepreneurs, inventors, investors, all these people will lose to these people, to these particular individuals who own the laws of matter. Why? Because the scientists who work for the federal government are in direct competition, and I have proof that I could show you that, are in direct competition for the millions and billions of dollars of grants and funds, not just domestically here within the United States, but globally. We have a globalistic language, I call it global linguistics. I've been arguing with the United Nations for 5 years now about the global linguistics that are on the move of deformizing, the human condition. We won't get into that discussion. We'll stay with physics for now, because physics is the very basis of origin of all things. And if you go into faith, and you believe in faith, and whatever you believe in, you have a faith. You see that physics is a tool of faith, and that faith exists in all dimensions, everywhere, at all times, at the same time. Yeah, even in the beginning of all things, before time. Faith is a conduit, it's a dimension, and it gives language and purpose to states of dimensions and space. And faith itself is a particulate, a dimension particulate that gives purpose to the states of space, so they can create whatever need be created for time in matter and in creation. Well, I'll end with that, and I appreciate your your attentiveness and your viewing. If you'd like to share this broadcast, you may. You could tune in. I like to talk about natural disasters because I'm very well involved with NASA and NOAA in challenging them directly with questions about natural disasters and what they did about the oil well spills back in 2010. I have emails to prove that. I'd like to show proof of my efforts because sometimes I get questioned. Well, what proof do you have of these engagements with scientists? What have you discovered? What can you show us that proves that? And here, I want to share this with you guys. You want to take a snapshot of it? You may. Here is the answer from NOAA. Let's go up to the top first. I want to show you. Let's go to the bottom here. Here the credentials of NOAA, right? And over here we have the Department of Commerce. Or for those of you who don't know what the Department of Commerce affiliates, the Department of the Interior. The Department of the Interior is responsible for national security of our nation. And I had a brief follow-up discussion with the Department of the Interior and NASA. And it was a brief email I sent them back in August 23rd of 2010. And my question was to follow up on an oil report. One of my questions was, have oils settling at bottom adhered to the sea floor, surfaces, sediments, sand, reefs, and stones? My next question, has any efforts been made to pursue migratory oils? Have scientists considered underwater or mid-water oil recovery? Thank you, Falcon. Now, the answer here that they've given me in reply. Okay, let's go back, sorry. There are many other studies. This is prevalent. They couldn't give me a definitive answer or a real answer because they were in the process of launching studies and seeking out help from subsidiary scientists and companies. There are many other studies. This is real life, folks. So if you want answers about disasters and how governments respond to disasters, this is it. There are many other studies of the state of the oil underway. For example, scientists funded, here you go, you see that? This is what I was trying to share with you. Scientists funded by the National Science Foundation, or the NSF, affiliated with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, have detected a plume of hydrocarbons at least 22 miles long and more than 3,000 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. A residue of the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill I. Expect that research like this to better characterize and answer some of the questions yet have posed will continue for some time. They had no answers. They were just launching research and discovery efforts. And it annoyed me because I did a really deep research, and I found that in their white papers, it's called white papers, the government white papers, that only specific types of methods of responding to oil disasters within the Gulf Stream water, the Gulf of Mexico. This is not just for the United States. This is for all oil wells that are drilling in oceans around the earth, from the north regions of the Arctic to the south regions of the Antarctic, the Mediterranean seas in Saudi Arabia. This is for all over the world. This is how governments respond to natural disasters. And my questions was, now, do you have any types of submersible, remote control submersible submarines that can chase the oil sheens and oil spills that are migrating mid-ocean, 3,000 feet below the sea? And do you have the science to actually detect the amount of sheen, not so much the plume is very thick, the sheen, the thin parts, so that you can trace them? And how exactly would that affect how to see the temperatures of the water, because we know that if the temperatures of the water are affected by how to say globules of oil, you ask, well, how is that possible? How can temperatures of water be affected by globules of oil? Because volumetrically speaking, globules of oil, how to say, hold heat differently than the water surrounding it. So if the oils, I should say, for example, it has a viscous capacity of retaining heat, guess what? The water temperature will be offset just a little bit because the oils have retained the heat and do not let go in evaporative states. The water can evaporate and lose heat up into the clouds. And oil sheens and droplets of oils can evaporate up with the water into the clouds. That might be the cause of a lot of storms also. But the actual oil sheens or the oil plume itself, the thick viscous oils, don't evaporate. They stay mid-water, and they can offset the temperature of the water. When the water is supposed to be, let's just say at a grade, we're going to speak in Fahrenheit. Let's say the temperature is supposed to be anywhere between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit for certain regions of the South Pacific, for example. We can say, well, why isn't that temperature? Why is the temperature of the water cold at this time of year? It's simply because maybe the oil has, hoarded the water temperatures and held it within their own embodiments. So instead of having a warm season, you might get a drought. You see what I'm saying? You might get a drought because of the evaporative state within the particular areas of California. You get what I'm saying now? The evaporative rates of states in the areas of the waters in California might have been decreased, even nominally, not by much, but even nominally to have created a drought. Well, that's one of my perspectives and one of my, my speculative discussions that I postulated with them. And they looked into that and they have debunked it, but they also have found that they need new language, that they don't know how droughts can create hailstorms and tornadoes and what have you. And in my book, I go into elaborative discussions on how exactly drought creates floods and how drought can create tornadoes and hailstorms and even earthquakes. But even if they don't have the compulsory need to seek out information that might create a language to prove that, it's a matter of just reading the book and finding out the truth. Because I create the language that collaborates everything into one harmonious page, onto one harmonious page so that everyone can understand. So if you haven't bought the book Plasma Phase Physics, in your own due time, look it up. It's online everywhere around the world. It's sold globally, worldwide, online. It's ascertainable by anyone who'd like to read it or to buy it. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you are in France, in the US, in Germany, Italy, in Estonia, Russia, in the North Pole. The book is available online worldwide. I really recommend that you read this book. And if you are curious, read the descriptive that is provided online with the book. I write a bit of a synopsis I gave to the publishers. And the publishers gave out some information as to what the book might be about, will be about, should be about. So look into that. I really appreciate your time. I might be giving a later morning TV broadcast on a different particular subject. I love this subject because for me it's the origin of all life. It's the origin of everything. It's where all arguments and debates and discussions begin. It is the very answer to world peace. I've given Obama secretly a lot of outlines to creating certain things that I can't mention. But I'd love to see that the whole world receive health care. You could have a poor man or poor woman living in squalor, but if they had 100% health care, they would be kings and queens, and that would be a beautiful thing. Anyway, those are my wishes and my dreams for greater good, for the greater people, of the world. So I'll continue that. All right, good for you. I'm not doing too many YouTubes because very busy writing volume 3. I'm doing a great deal of research. You see, my research, the reason why I do so much research is not because I want to found create a language based upon other scientific findings, or other curriculum based ideologies or teachings. I want to seek out, and no man has gone before, no one or no woman has gone before, and create a platform where people can be all invited, wherever walks of life that they're from. They don't have to be highly educated. All you have to do is be an inquisitive person who has a great perspective, and be able to come to platform and discuss and argue and debate your disposition. And with that alone, we can create ambassadors, where I think that all people should be at right now, in our year of 2016, for Christ's sakes, no? Anyway, I love you guys. I gotta let you go. Stay tuned. Maybe by 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. Eastern, I'll be posting another broadcast for you. You're welcome, sir. Hey, Mike. Hey, brother. I didn't know you were watching. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do another Skype later. I remember all my language is new. Hey, buddy. All my language is new. I try. In the book, it's very confounded. It's incredibly sophisticated. And I don't mean sophisticated in a conceited way. I mean sophisticated because, remember, there are words in there that I had to create and write that probably you'll hear in the news as of late. I've been hearing the culture of the news, people, the news broadcast, meteorologists, scientists thereof, even politicians use a lot there. There's new languages that are in the book, and you just go out and just seek it out, guys, and share it, find a word in there, goes, oh, do you know about this? Do you know about that? Oh, yeah? Challenge somebody, challenge yourself, challenge me, ask me questions. I might have forgot something, or I might want to be better. might better something or improve upon it, So stay tuned. I got to sign off for now. I'm going to have some breakfast. God bless, guys.